People in all communities, big and small, suffered because of the spread of COVID-19. Villages, even in far rural areas, had to be shut down due to high spreading of COVID. Hello, I'm Sarah Nicholas with my co-hosts Esther Nicholas and Tyra Nick. And welcome to Stay Safe, Stay Curious, where we explore events that shaped our world. COVID affected people all across the United States. COVID specifically affected Alaska because people were being caught by COVID and most villages had to go on lockdown because of the spread of COVID. People in Alaska in big and small villages had to be hospitalized. In total, there were 1,485 deaths and many more hospitalizations in Alaska because of COVID, and most families in Alaska had to be locked down. One personal story was my family had to go into quarantine for 10 days or more. If our tests were still positive, then we would have to be quarantined for another 10 days in US. And how did the government respond?
COVID occurred during the years 2019 to 2020. In early 2020, the CDC issued 14-day federal quarantine orders to all 195 U.S. citizens who were repatriated back to the United States on January 29, 2020 from Wuhan, China. The Trump administration declared a nationwide emergency and issued an additional travel ban on non-U.S. citizens traveling from 26 European countries due to COVID-19. Tyra, can you tell us more about what the government did?
The Trump administration launched Operation Warp Speed in an initiative to produce a vaccine against the SARS-CoV-2 virus as quickly as possible. The operation funds the development of 6 promising vaccine candidates while they are still in the initial trial phase, including the Pfizer biotech, and Moderna mRNA vaccines in 2021. The Biden administration, working through CDC, invested $2.1 billion in funding for state, local, and territorial public health departments to give them the resources needed to prevent infections in healthcare settings, detect and contain infectious organisms, enhance laboratory capacity, and combat infectious disease threats, including COVID-19. Sarah, can you tell us about how other communities experience pandemic differently? The Department of Homeland Security (DHS) directed all flights from China and all passengers who have traveled to China within the last 14 days to be routed to one of 11 airports in the U.S. for enhanced screening procedure and possible quarantine. U.S. citizens who have been in Hubei province within 14 days of their return are subject up to 14 days of mandatory quarantine. U.S. citizens who have been in other areas of mainland China within 14 days of their return are subject to 14 days of self-quarantine, self-health monitoring, and foreign national other than immediate family of U.S. citizens, permanent resident, and flight curfew who have traveled in China, excluding Hong Kong and Macau, within 14 days of their arrival, will be denied entry in the U.S. Esther, what did the CDC do to try to stop COVID from spreading?
The CDC submits an emergency use authorization EUA to FDA to expedite approval for a CDC development SARS-CoV-2 diagnostic test. Navajo officials implement a series of mitigation efforts, including extended weekend lockdowns, curfews, stay-at-home orders, masking, and checkpoints. Many states, including California, Michigan, and Indiana, postponed reopening plans as COVID-19 case numbers rose. The CDC noted that people ages 70 years and older who live in multi-generational households should be given priority as soon as more vaccine doses are available. The CDC asked healthy people to donate blood if they are able to, amid a national shortage of blood during the COVID-19 pandemic. Tyra, what are some more effects of COVID in the U.S.?
California Governor Gavin Newsom issues the statewide stay-at-home order to slow the spread of COVID-19, instructing residents to only leave their homes when necessary and shutting down all but essential businesses. The unemployment rate in the U.S. rose to 14.7%, the highest since the Great Depression, with 20.5 million people out of work. The hospitality, leisure, and healthcare industries took the greatest hits overall, affecting essential workers, people with lower incomes, and racial and ethnic minority workers disproportionately. Sarah, how did the media shape public response to COVID?
During the COVID-19 pandemic, media representations of complex, rapidly evolving epidemiological science shaped public understanding of the risk measuring to limit disease spreading and associated political and policy discourses. The COVID-19 pandemic brought significant challenges to the nation's public health and economy. Since March 2020, Congress had provided over $4.65 trillion in federal funds through the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security CARES Act and other laws to help the nation respond to and recover from the pandemic. Esther, can you tell us how rural residents faced COVID differently than city residents?
Rural residents also faced unique risks related to COVID-19. On average, compared to urban dwellers, rural residents are older, more likely to have underlying health conditions, and less likely to have health insurance or financial resources to weather this sustained storm. Challenges to accessing healthcare in rural areas, even in the best of times, are well documented in this journal and elsewhere. More than 125 rural hospitals across the United States have closed in the past decade. Nearly half of those that remain teeter on the edge of making it. Tyra, how did the government of Alaska react when COVID hit Alaska?
COVID reached Alaska on March 7, 2020. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, Governor Dunleavy focused on 6 areas to provide stability to the economy and ensuring Alaska has the resources needed during this unprecedented time. Alaska Governor Mike Dunleavy with Congressman Dung Young, Senator Lisa Murkowski, and Senator Dan Sullivan coordinated efforts to address the impact of the COVID-19 in Alaskans and Alaska's economy. Sarah, can you tell us how the school was during COVID?
The COVID-19 pandemic shut down schools and education moved online in the spring of 2020. With in-person classes cancelled, the normal structure of school for K-12 students, teachers, candidates, and other ministers disappeared. School districts scrambled to provide technology, develop structures, and modify grades policies. Teacher preparation program had to quickly determine acceptable student teaching experience and how candidates would demonstrate teaching competency. Esther, can you explain how COVID affected Alaskans' health and public places?
COVID-19 exposed inequalities in healthcare that have existed for centuries in the United States. Individuals and communities already more likely to experience health disparities are the same people at highest risk for both the health and economic impact of the pandemic. In Southwest Alaska, many villages had to go on lockdown because of the high rise of COVID, and the villagers couldn't go to other villages. They also couldn't go to stores, post offices, hardwares, school, community, tribal, washateria, and church. They were only able to go to clinic to test if they were good to go off quarantine. This lasted over a year until cases of COVID began to lessen and they began to reopen public places. Sarah, what happened during COVID?
People in villages were in quarantine and people were hardly out and they were schooling from home. Kasigalok was on lockdown when more people got sick from COVID. People would isolate and quarantine for 2 weeks. Esther, how did COVID affect the people?
People were affected from COVID by spreading so quickly from person to person. Families, elders, and students were affected. COVID had spread really quick. They would have to go on lockdown in order to get better and to not let anyone go out so it would spread to other family members and to get better faster. Most people would keep their house clean and wipe everything down to keep the sickness away. People had to steam with some kind of Vicks oil to get better. There are different types of ways people got better. Tyra, how did the community and the school feel?
I think people didn't like remote schooling because they didn't like staying home and working on schoolwork in their house. How the community adapted, they didn't like staying home and being on quarantine for 2 weeks. Keeping their house clean, wiping everything inside of their house, making traditional medicine, and also keeping themselves clean. They had to take care of each other and couldn't rely on going to town to get help. Sarah, what did you experience about COVID?
A lot of people experienced it. They had no sense of smell, taste, shortness of breath, and dry throat. There were different types of sicknesses during COVID. People had to take vaccine shots, staying home until they recovered from COVID-19.
COVID-19 significantly impacted both the United States, the state of Alaska, also the village of Basirak, particularly in terms of public health, the economy, and social life. The pandemic led to widespread business closures, unemployment, and changes in working habits. The virus caused widespread illness and death, leading to strains on healthcare systems and increased mortality rates. Businesses were forced to shut down, leading to job losses and a decline in overall economic activity. Schools closed and social gatherings were restricted, significantly changing the lives of individuals and communities.
The COVID-19 pandemic highlighted the importance of addressing social needs and how they impact the needs that we need. It also showed the effectiveness of masks and vaccines and the potential for our health to become more common. The pandemic underscored the need for mental health support and the importance of recognizing that not everyone is treated equally during a crisis. It is important to remember the small communities if they're in need of more help.
Thanks for tuning in and listening to Stay Safe, Stay Curious podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to Jack Batki on YouTube. Feel free to share your thoughts with us on YouTube.